Crisis averted. Somebody would probably sue me for copyright if I hear any of the music in the beginning of the movie. So it's Bienvenidos al Infierno. So this is, from what I can tell, a Mexican film directed by Jimena Monteoliva, starring Constanza Cardillo. That's really all you need to know because I'm not sure who the other actors who plays what. But she plays the main character, and she is. This movie's weird. So it's pretty recent. It's from 2021. It's relatively new. They've recently added a lot of these kind of really obscure Mexican-produced horror-oriented things. And I've sampled a few, and I mean the photography looks good, the acting's solid. They're very professionally done, professional looking and well done, and without being overcooked. And they seem interesting, but then when I dive into some of them individually, the actual stories are not really grabbing me, and the cinematic nature isn't really, Welcome to Hell, the reason I wanted to see it, besides the fact it obviously had a satanic kind of motif, which of course always attracts me. But the main plot, let me just read you this quick recap that they give you. To escape the leader of a satanic death metal band and the father of her unborn child, awkwardly worded, but yeah, a young woman moves to a remote location in the woods. Okay, so they should have said a leader of a satanic death metal band who is also the father of her unborn child. So naturally, I wanted to see how they depicted this satanic death metal band. So I don't know if it's confusion on the part of the filmmakers; they just do what they wanted to do and didn't give a fuck, or there's a different kind of scene in Mexico with the stuff that I'm not aware of. And I've tried to follow international strains in black metal and death metal. I'm no expert, but black metal, especially the more progressive and atmospheric black metal, is being made all over the world in just about every country imaginable. And a lot of it is super duper high quality, and it's made by people, in a small studio or in their house. Sometimes it's only one guy. Sometimes it's more than one. Rarely is it like a full traveling playing touring band. There are exceptions of some bands that have gotten to a higher level, like say Psychonaut 4 with Graf von Baphomet on vocals. He's become pretty notorious because he's amazing. He's unearthly screamer. But they're like a full band, bass, drums, guitar, maybe two guitars. That's the kind of band they show in here is basically guitar, bass, drums, and a vocalist. And the way the music really sounds more like black metal, and kind of like classic, if you want to call it classic, kind of just straight ahead black metal, blast beats and but a lot of the super heavy fast guitar, but more of the Euronymous like guitar, not the kind of guitar that I love so much in the current atmospheric black metal or black gaze scene that's uses the super fast tremolo picking and giving these really melodic chords. It's like the Cocteau Twins on some kind of extreme drug. They hyped up Robin Guthrie. They shot him up with some kind of formula. He went crazy. But I love that shit. So this isn't like that. It's not melodic. It's pounding. It's not as predictable though as a lot of American metal when they try to portray those bands on stage in a movie. Like I still haven't seen Lords of Chaos. Ostensibly the story of Mayhem, a band that I know quite a bit about and have followed. Not followed them since the beginning, but I got into them maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and have heard all their stuff that I'm aware of. But this band is kind of like, or trying kind of like early Mayhem, Dark Throne, Norwegian, but a little more kind of dull. Fast beats, yeah. And the drum, the vocalist, he's his look is kind of weird. I mean, he's kind of got long hair, matted hair, and a long big beard. And he wears the corpse paint. They all wear the corpse paint on stage. So again, they're using the emblems of black metal, just straight ahead black metal. Again, I'll say classic because those guys in Mayhem like Hellhammer and what's his face, Necro Butcher. I forgot his real name. Necro Butcher, the bass player, the only original member still in Mayhem. He's like in his early 50s. He started playing in Mayhem when he was 14 or 15. He started Mayhem in 1983. So he was into bands like Venom and Celtic Frost, who were current contemporaries. But before that, they had the band Hellhammer, Bathory. These really early kind of proto black metal bands that I personally do consider black metal. It's an earlier form. And then it kind of mutated through the years because basically, probably like I did, they spent a lot of years just kind of messing around and not really recording things, not having a cohesive band, just hanging out. And the years go by, and you're just like, one day we'll record an album or one day we'll get the guys back together. And they finally did toward the end of the 80s start to get it together, and it revolved around Euronymous' store. I think it's called Hexen or something like that, which. I think no, it was Helvetica. I'm sorry, Helvetica, Hexen, and or Hellbat. I'm telling you all this because I really do want to see Lords of Chaos now. It's probably garbage, but anyway. So I was expecting they were going to have this kind of slant, but they were going to do it more like a character like Vard Vicurnus, the real life guy, Count Rishnok, who replaced Necro Butcher temporarily in Mayhem and then killed the leader of Mayhem, Euronymous, the guitar player who owned the shop. And then went to prison for 15 years and has been banned from YouTube, which I don't support him being banned from YouTube. He's kind of sneaked back in, but I watched some of his channel. I don't like a lot of things about him and his beliefs. But he's interesting to listen to. He's smart, and I like to hear the history of this stuff from his point of view. It may be very jaundiced. I've also listened to a lot of interviews with Necro Butcher and some of those cats. But so, when these guys come off stage, they're nothing like that. They're like just a dime a dozen kind of, thrash, kind of death metal, but not even technical like death metal is. And they're slovenly, and they live in like a warehouse. There's like no furniture. There's like a futon. Yes, I don't know. It might be the club. At first, I thought it was the club itself. It reminded me of this club here, the Milestone, this long-lasting punk dive, real kind of world-famous Milestone club that it's called. And it kind of is by now. A lot of other bands played here early in their career, punk and alternative groups. The group I was in, Chiaroscuro, played here, though I wasn't in the band at the time. I replaced the singer who played, but Chiaroscuro played at least maybe 6 gigs at Milestone. I practically lived at Milestone in like 90, 91, 92. So with all that behind me and knowledge-wise, I'm disappointed by the fact they really don't talk much about the music or the lyrics. They don't really explore that side a lot. Basically, the girl, the main character, she's infatuated with this cat, which I totally didn't understand. She's in the audience singing with the makeup and everything. She's with her friend, and she's like, oh, and it's just, this whole sexual, thing. And then invariably they make out. And invariably, they start experimenting with, bloodletting, cutting, kind of sadomasochism, choking and beating each other while they're, on the road to fucking. That's like their foreplay. Like a lot of movies where people have sex that aren't very frank, adult, realistic movies. They have sex mostly with their clothes on. And when they're all steamed up, making out, having sex, you never see any genitals being reached for, which is weird. In this case, she did unzip his pants one time, and he mounted her, but again, it was like they had enough clothing on where it would have been extremely awkward. So, they just, I never really got that. I've seen so many movies that did that stuff right, that to see the ones that still do it kind of in a lame fashion, it's just, I mean, who cares? And that's kind of the feeling I got about that character. I don't remember. His name is, his real name was Christian, ironically, but they called him the Monk. So the Monk is the leader of this band. I don't remember the name of the band. I don't remember the name of the main character. I think her name is Lucia. There's Lucia and Maria, her friend. I might get their names mixed up. So the main character is either Maria or Lucia. But anyway, I'll say it's Lucia. They pronounce it Lucia, not Lucia. And like in Italy, she lives in, yeah, she does go live in the woods, and she lives with her grandmother. So you have this kind of backstory going with her grandmother. Her grandmother is she's mute. She never talks. She's very much kind of the old crone type. She is seemingly, yes, a witch, and has knowledge of supernatural things. So, she, writes things down to her granddaughter, and there's some backstory about Lucy's mother died young and kind of foisted her off on the grandmother, and she was probably an orphan, the girl, and this is the only place she has to go now, and she's been hanging with her friend and then with the dude, and that's gone sour. And for a lot of the movie, it goes from the current day to a flashback to several months earlier. So you have like her in the woods with her grandmother, and she's pregnant, very pregnant. And then you have the flashbacks to when she sees the band. They get together, she gets pregnant, and this guy is like on his little spiel. Like a lot of like a lot of people of this nature in real life. Unfortunately, in real life, and some would argue Varg Vikernes was a lot like this in real life. Or some argue he still is. This guy believes he's like this genius mastermind that's gonna, change the world. So his thing is not like a racial purity European thing like Norwegian, because he is Hispanic. His thing is just straight out Satanism, and he makes a lot of vague allusions. And the band kind of act like they're his cult. They're not very distinguished characters. One guy in the band who's kind of the least wild looking, just very straight brown hair and t-shirt. They wear a lot of t-shirts of bands that, people into this would know. Mayhem shirts, Burzum shirts. That's Varg's band or project. And this guy is kind of quiet and manipulative, and I don't know. He starts to kind of steer the band away from the monk, because I think they think he's just crazy. Then he's studying all this occultism, and he's making a big deal of the fact he's impregnated his girlfriend, our main character, and it's some kind of portentous thing, like the infant is going to play into some kind of ritual, and he's going to gain some kind of power. So it's not so much an ideological thing, like in some of the black metal bands of that Lords of Chaos scene in Norway. It's more of a true supernatural. Like, this guy really believes in this shit, and it's really going to happen. So in that sense, it reminded me of another movie. And I'm going to forget what it was. Oh yeah, this crazy movie called damn man. You guys would know it immediately. I think I even reviewed it on this channel. It's kind of a send-up kind of satire, but also horror. This chick dies and comes back to life, and her best friend has to put up with her. But the reason she dies is they go to a show, and it's called Jennifer or Jennifer's Body. Jennifer's Body. Reminds me of that. The band, like, she's so excited to be with them, and then they take her in the woods. And even though they're like this kind of goofy alternative band, and they kind of dress kind of preppy, they turn out to actually be Satanists, even though they don't have that image at all. And they kill her and cut her up, and it's pretty fucked up. And she comes back to life as a zombie, and it annihilates them one by one, while also bugging the shit out of her best friend, who's not a zombie, played by, I believe, Amanda Seyfried. Amanda Seyfried of Twin Peaks and First Reformed. So yeah, that reminded me of Jennifer's Body, kind of. So there's not a lot of detail. There's some humanism and some of the characterizations of the girl and her grandmother. It's well shot. The way they, gradually unveil things through the flashbacks compared with the modern scenes is fine. But I was just kind of slugging it out with this one. I couldn't watch it in one sitting. So finally, I went ahead and said, okay, I'm going to give the last 20 whatever minutes a shot here. This is some new mango, aloe vera mango drink that I tried. It has pulp in it. It's kind of gross, but the actual flavor is pretty cool. And, I've been on a mango kick lately, mango and guava. So they do the ritual. They knock her out, our main character. They tie her to a cross, an upside down cross with ropes, her hands. They do actually hammer a nail into one of her hands. And he's going to cut her open. He's going to cut her open and take the baby out, it looks like. So the grandmother's trying to stop them. And what you find is the band members are not up to this. They're trying to be menacing, but they're just kind of morons. The grandmother has a shotgun. She blows two of them away, not at the same time, but one guy gets horribly injured. One guy gets injured, and before she's tied up, Lucia herself beats him to death the rest of the way with a pipe or something, a stick. So there's really only two left. There's kind of the stoic, long-haired guy I mentioned, and then there's the monk, and then she's up on the cross. And I think the band and their buddy, I think altogether it's 5 guys. So I think 3 of them are killed, or at least 2 are definitely killed, and one's badly maimed. So much for his henchmen, right? But they got her. He's gonna do his silly ritual, and it looks like it gets very dark at times, and I think they take out I thought they took out the grandmother, either killed her or knocked her unconscious, beat her up, just get her off camera. She's no longer a threat to the ones that are left. But as this stuff starts to happen, it's weird as fuck. They start to get into some really deep images with the monk guy, and he, his look without the corpse paint. It's kind of slovenly and stuff, but they go in for the kind of Christ Manson kind of look, and he's pretty effective. He does wear some makeup around his eyes when he does this ritual, and he looks pretty intense, and you kind of start to believe his character really believes this. Now, I didn't believe it, and Lucia didn't believe it, and the other band members really didn't believe it. But the grandmother believed it. And so the best part of the movie, near the very end, they summon, it's a demon. It's like, I kept talking about Satan, but it's a demon, and it's female, totally naked, blood red skin. They got the texture of the skin just right. I mean, with this kind of tight costume, it doesn't look like rubber or anything. It doesn't look like CGI. Practical. She's got long nails. She's got like horns, and she's a crazy looking face. And her breasts are small. Her nipples are kind of weird and black and sticking out, but not like erotic. But it makes her look more alienish. I think she was a good monster, a good creature. So this movie did deliver on that. I didn't think it was going to show us any monsters, or if they did, they were going to make it ambiguous, or it was going to look stupid. This one was cool. It was obviously somebody who's more inspired by supernatural movies with a lot of creatures, interesting looking creatures, stuff like Clive Barker or maybe Guillermo del Toro, or I'm trying to think of some underground filmmakers that have put the money into and creativity into making a creature like this. And she's very tall, so that's where I think probably the CGI or some effects with her height were used. So he's probably 6 feet tall, and she's probably like 8 feet tall. And she basically she kills the other guy, hanger-on guy, and finally she tells Christian she's gonna give him what he's looking for, and man, it's incredible effects, and it blows his face up like flames, and it's really good. I really like the last like 10 minutes. That segment. Um, and at first I thought maybe the grandmother turned into the demon, and the grandmother was the demon the whole time. There's just a lot of weird things there that unfortunately they don't foreshadow enough throughout the movie, articulately enough. So there's not so when the payoff comes, you're not armed with enough information to really enjoy the weirdness and what they're trying to get across about this creature and why this creature is as it is and does what it does, and why she came instead of Satan or another demon, or what's the deal. There's dialogue, and her dialogue's cool and her voice is cool, but in the end, she goes away and leaves Lucia, and it turns out the grandmother is alive, and she tells her grandmother, that what are you? There's more to you than I know. And so I thought, is she the demon? But I think maybe she meant, if the grandmother really was on that wavelength, the grandmother knew this demon was going to come. I think she knew all along that they were playing with this, and she was trying to guide Lucia away from it. And then she kind of had to take a stand. Lucia is more like a character who's a reactionary character. She's, things are done to her and she reacts. She doesn't really do anything proactive. She did kill the one guy, which was cool, to defend herself, but she doesn't really grasp what's happening. But I think that's part of the point of the movie is she gets in over her head. Like I said, it's well made. That idea could have been a lot better done, though. I think it had been deeper and richer. So, I'd say it's an. I don't know. Watch it for the demon, the female demon. So let me continue as quick as I can here with some here that I have been wrapping up here. There's one called Midnight, and it is a Korean film. I'm not sure if I'm going to easily find it on here. It's been so far back since I watched it. Let's see. So it's a South Korean film, and I was really expecting, they're usually extremely well made and interesting. And so I thought, surely this one is not going to disappoint me. It's about a serial killer, and he's kind of a smarmy kind of dude. He's kind of like so unctuous that you just, want to smash his face. Kind of like the character Lee Ju-tai, I think that's how you say the character's name, in Old Boy. So that actor had, and the writing for him had more richness and depth than this character in Midnight. But basically, I'm having trouble finding on my list. I don't think I deleted it, but it's basically like a deaf girl. No, she's not deaf. She's mute. She's mute, and I think maybe she is deaf. Her mother, for some odd reason, is also mute, and it's very confusing. I didn't really figure out, again, why they were as they were. You just kind of like are thrown in with this. So here's the rundown. After bearing witness to murder at the hands of a serial killer, a deaf woman is ruthlessly hunted down by him through the streets of South Korea. This is by Oh-Seung Kwon, and it's kind of slack for a modern South Korean thriller. It's there's not a lot of serial killing going on. I mean, they hint at a lot of morbid things this guy does and kinks he has, but not much is really shown, and it gets ridiculous at times. Like the police have all these opportunities where the two women are trying to tell them. Well, first the mother's trying to tell the daughter he's the killer, because when she encounters the killer, sees him killing this woman, he's got a mask on. He's got like a thing for COVID. He's got like a surgical mask and a cap, I think. So then he disguises as this, kind, sweet guy in a suit, and he's looking for his sister. And he kind of fucks up because the brother of the character that he killed in front of the mute girl. The brother has been looking for the sister. He's not to be messed with, and he's beating the shit out of this guy. But then, of course, the cops side with the serial killer, and the serial killer gets away, and the cops are like, "We're sorry," all these stupid. They drag it out. So it was a bummer. I was hoping for a really good South Korean serial killer new film for my Halloween slate, and I got this one instead. So we can move on from Midnight. That's my official review of Midnight. Okay, She Beast. This is one I watched. I had seen a few years ago. Michael Reeves. This one is pretty well known among old school horror fans. Of course, Michael Reeves had a short and tempestuous life, as I understand it. I forgot the order in which he did these movies. This movie came out originally. She Beast came out in 1966. This could be his first one. I know Witchfinder General came out near like 1970, but then he also did the one Night of the Sorcerer or something of the Sorcerer. I'm getting confused. I don't want to get it confused with Amanda de Osorio's similarly titled film. Oh no, it's just called The Sorcerers. And Boris Karloff. That's a really good movie. Both of those latter two movies are really good, and a lot of people, like the cats who put together Phil Hardy's Horror Encyclopedia, praised Michael Reeves a lot. In the early '90s when they put out those volumes about how much untold potential he had. It's kind of like a rock star who dies young. Who knows what he could have achieved. So I'm with him, but then I watched She Beast, and I pay much more attention to it than I did, I guess, the other time I saw it. And it had been hyped quite a bit too over the years to me. I forgot the original or alternate name. It's better. I can't remember what it is, but She Beast is, I guess, the name they chose. It's rated PG on here, and it's very disappointing. It's got Barbara Steele, so you kind of need to see it because it's Barbara Steele during her, the apex of her iconic stature as a horror queen. She's not really utilized in this movie well. She's off camera for long periods of the movie. Instead, it falls into the hands of John Carlsen, who plays her boyfriend, and he's kind of, or whatever. They're on a trip together. I don't know where they end up, but they end up being hosted by and then agitated by this insane stereotypical Russian character. And he says all these Russian cliches, all kinds of Russophobe cliches that people had back in the old days. And of course, he drinks vodka nonstop, and he tries to rape all the women. The only really horrific scene in the movie is when he nearly succeeds in raping this other incidental female character, and it's kind of drawn out. And there you have a little bit of the real cruelty that you see later in Reeves' Witchfinder General, but she gets away, which I was glad for the character, but after that, the guy, he's not really a menace. And then he has some cousin who's another bumbling, but not as stupid, Eastern European cat, and they spend a lot of time with this character, showing him drinking, lusting after women. I mean, obviously, I got early on, yes, he's the comic relief and sort of the antagonist, but there's no direction, and literally no direction. Michael Reeves, this isn't a tight movie. It's the only thing that keeps it on track somewhat is this older character, and I don't know which actor played him, but he's kind of a guy who's versed in the occult, and he basically, they go driving and they go into the lake, and apparently Barbara Steele, the wife, dies. So the husband's distraught, and the old man is trying to tell him, she's not really dead. She's been possessed, by the supernatural thing I've encountered before. And they go to find her body, and they have this like craggy witch demon-like body, and the makeup's kind of cheesy, really. And then, of course, the Russian guy, keeps like trying to trick them, and the grieving husband, he doesn't believe. He's like, we gotta save her, and the old man's like, well, that's what I'm trying to do. But I gotta cast the spell, and he's like, I don't believe in any of that, and it's just this back and forth of these three characters. The old man comes out the best, but the hubby and the Soviet cat, they're just embarrassing, sad, pathetic characters. And Barbara is saved miraculously near the end, and she's back, and I don't think she even remembers what happens. And they never really fully explain. Anyway, my friend Tim McLean warned me when I told him I was watching this. Should have listened, but anyway, he didn't tell me not to watch it. But so She Beast was a very Halloween appropriate movie for me to stream on here, and it was a big disappointment. So let me wrap up with one more. Now this is one I watched around the same time, and again, this is kind of a genre crossing kind of movie, but I really think it belongs as a horror movie, because if giallos and slashers are horror movies, then these kind of movies are. And also all kinds of really weird and disturbing and torture porn kind of movies. So you're probably thinking, what the hell kind of movie is that? So it's basically it's a guy who's a retired hitman, and he's contracted to murder this guy. I forgot the character's name. They do give it, but he's mainly known as the Doctor. Here's the plot summary. This came out in 1984. When his good friend is murdered by a doctor who specializes in torture, a retired government assassin comes gunning for vengeance. So I haven't told you the cool thing about it. The main guy is played by Charles Bronson, and this movie's called The Evil That Men Do. It was one of the movies he did with like Cannon, or one of those Golden Globus, one of those cheaper indie, semi-indie kind of studios that churned out a lot of stuff in the 80s, some of it really good, some of it shitty, some of it just kind of mediocre. But they had a lot of range. I have an affection for a lot of their movies, I admit it. They were reluctant to getting Bronson. I mean, they got a few major stars to get into some of their movies, but they headlined them. But they got Bronson, and Bronson did a few. Bronson did Kinjite, Forbidden Subjects, which I got halfway through. I didn't think it was quite horror tinged enough to finish and include in this. And then I also did 10 After Midnight. 10 After Midnight actually does have an insane serial killer, and it's a very perverted film. It is like Bronson stranded in this sleazy 80s, sex maniac serial killer film. And a lot of people who are into horror love 10 to Midnight, and they love all three of these Bronson movies. Several of my friends, there's their favorite Bronsons. Now, these same people also produced some of the late Death Wish ones. And the formula, the low budget, kind of grimy, sleazy formula, it just doesn't work it didn't work for me, because they keep amping up every movie. Bronson's got bigger artillery, and it becomes even more of a caricature than it had become by Death Wish 3, which a lot of horror fans I know worship that movie and think it's the best one of the series. I only like the first one. I only saw the second one for the first time about 2 years ago. Had a great soundtrack. I think it's by Jimmy Page. First movie had a great soundtrack by Herbie Hancock. I loved the first movie. I have it on Blu-ray. But Death Wish 2 is, it's watchable. It's not very plausible the way they drag it out, but at least it's somewhat continuity. It adheres somewhat pretty closely to the continuity of the first film. From 3 on, it gets ridiculous. In every film, he gets a different girlfriend who's our best friend, and both, or whatever, and they're brutally raped, murdered, whatever, and he goes after the gang. So this guy's just bad news. It's kind of like the TV series Mike Hammer in the 80s. Like every episode, Mike Hammer's like, my buddy Joe got killed by so-and-so. I'm going to investigate this, Belda. And hard-bitten Stacy Keach goes out and avenges his friend. And I'm like, how many friends of yours are going to die? I mean, people shouldn't be your friend. I mean, it's a dangerous... Same thing with Murder, She Wrote. I mean, a lot of those episodes, the people who were killed were Oh, it's my old friend, Jessica Fletcher's old friend. I heard Angela Lansbury died. That was weird. But and I'm like, how many friends does Jessica have that get murdered? So Bronson's got the same problem. You know, everybody attracted to him gets whacked. But at least he brutally avenges all of them. So I guess that something comes out of it karmically. Um, Evil That Men Do is not like Death Wish. He doesn't play a cop like in Kinjite and uh, 10 Seconds to Midnight. 10 Seconds to Midnight, he's a fairly cool macho guy. You can kind of get behind him. Seems like he's playing in a different movie than the serial killer, but that's what makes it interesting and fun. Kinjite, he's an asshole. He's really a very unlikable cop. He's like a really racist, conservative asshole. And that was weird seeing him portrayed in that light to where he's totally the unsympathetic. Not that the antagonists are sympathetic in any way, they're not. And it had a lot of other subplots because a lot of it has to do with Japanese Americans, and particularly a Japanese guy who comes to live in America because of a business thing, and he's kind of a pervert. But then, like, his daughter is raped or kidnapped or something, and Bronson's daughter's molested by an Asian guy, and he starts getting all racist, and he crosses paths with this grieving Japanese perverted father. Anyway, I didn't finish it. Anyway, The Evil That Men Do is a lot more solid. So basically, you've got a character um, who's Jose Ferrer. Jose Ferrer comes to Bronson. He's retired in like the islands, the Caribbean or whatever, and he's living a wonderful life in his 60s. Even though probably playing a character 10 years younger. Um, he was 64 when he made this movie, and Jose's trying to lull him out of retirement, and basically he's like, "There's this guy, this doctor. He is utilized in South America by a lot of the military and political figures and dictators and terrorists and killers to torture their enemies and off them in horrific ways. And he's got quite a body count. I want you to take him out." Bronson's like, "I'm retired. I told you I'm retired. Okay." And then they play him. He gives him these tapes, these videotapes. And he's like, "Will you watch these?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'll watch them. And so he takes them and watches them. And they're basically interviews of people. And, you see them briefly on camera. But a lot of times you see Bronson, instead of what's on camera, you see Bronson's reaction or Bronson, like, making himself a drink or doing something, prosaic. And Jose Ferrer's outside and he can hear it playing. He's already heard him. And scene goes on for quite a while, and basically it's a litany of extreme perversions that are visited upon the victims of the doctor. So basically, he's like, I'm just giving you an example, kind of a composite, but you're just like, yes, he tied me down, he flayed my testicles, then he smeared feces into my eyes. Then after that, he gelded me for completely, and poured acid on my hands. I'm just throwing everything into one guy. But basically, that's what it is. Like one after the other, male and female reporting, mainly male, but I think there's a couple women, and it's just like they're all, they on camera they look fine, but you don't see their whole body. But basically, they're all like mutilated and fucked up. Jose Ferrer takes him to the hospital, where's this hospital devoted to victims, the ones who survived the doctor, and they're all crippled and fucked up and amputees. And so Bronson's like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And then they're talking about money. He's like, "Nah, I don't need the money." And so that's when you get all righteous. Bronson kicks into gear, and he's a blast. And by the way, J. Lee Thompson directed this. And he was a very workmanlike director. He directed quite a few films. My good buddy Bill White told me that he was a big fan of Thompson, and he gave me a list of all his movies. He'd seen all of them. And I'd seen about half of them, which is like almost 20 movies. There's still like almost 20 more I have not seen. But I knew him as a very good kind of you know, a journeyman director who could kind of distinguish himself. What my experience was, you know, I was aware of the Bronson films and I'd seen 10 to Midnight, um, but I enjoyed him for Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, which is one of my very favorite films. It's my second favorite Apes film after the first Apes film. I adore Conquest. And then he did the follow-up Battle, which took me many years to kind of come around to liking, but I do like it. And I've reviewed that set on this channel. Um, check it out if you can find it on my thing. But by the way, please like and subscribe. I'm in need of growing the channel, and the channel was on an incline, and now it's kind of on a decline, and now it's like planing out to where it's picking up a little. So I'm sharing it around on social media. I won't get into all that because I talked about it too much in my last video and went off track of talking about Last Man on Earth and Omega Man. I will talk about that probably in one before Halloween's over. I'll share some of my good and bad experiences of reactions to me now networking and sharing this all over Facebook. So, you know, Bronson goes after the guy, and it's kind of a cat and a mouse thing. And Teresa Saldana comes in there, and her daughter, and they pose as his wife. Basically, the movie opened with them murdering her husband, who was like a journalist who got tied up in literally in this mess, and they offed him. And he was a good friend of Bronson's, though they hadn't seen each other in years. Now, Teresa Saldana, you know, was a very attractive young, I guess, Hispanic actress whose career was kind of on the incline. This kind of on the decline, but she's especially known for being attacked by an insane fan and like stabbed a lot of times. And she survived, and she had to have plastic surgery and all this stuff. But really, kind of, she gave up for the most part her acting career after that. I don't think this movie was after the attack, but it could have been. I'm not sure. I should have checked that out. If it's after, it's probably like, well, I'm going to give it another shot and try it. You know, do this kind of low budget movie because Charles Bronson's in it. She's good, though. Kind of lacking the fire of her early roles, but again, a lot of this is the way J. Lee Thompson's directing. He's moving the movie along. He's moving Bronson closer and closer to the doctor. So there's all these kind of plot contrivances that get in the way, like, you know, this dictator who the doctors tortured people for before. The doctor's like, you gotta protect me, I've helped you. He's this real pompous British guy, and he's like been totally above the law, you know, and he's been hooked up with all of these nasty political people. So he's gotten away with not just murder, but with murder and gelding and rapes and dismemberments and, you know, skinning alive, and like I said, on and on and on and on. And loving every minute of it. And the dictator's like, I don't know, we need to kind of keep things quiet for a while and keep this on the down low because it's making us look bad. Just wait. And the doctor's like, I have done a lot for you, and you know, and he's like, I do not like being treated this way. And his doctor has a sister that he has this almost incestuous relationship with. The doctor's fairly old, probably early 60s at that time. At that time, that was fairly old. He might have been older. He was probably older than Bronson, but not in as good shape. Sister was old too, like a 50-ish woman, and she's British, and she's very haughty and mean and cold, and they're both like total sociopaths. And so they kidnap the sister, and they end up killing her by accident. And so Bronson's like bluffing for the whole last part of the movie. He's like, I'll give you your sister back, but you've got to do this. And so you got to meet me here. And of course, Bronson doesn't even have to take out the guy because a whole bunch of these workers in this site where Bronson is going to meet the guy, it turns out they all know who he is, and they've all either been victims of him or their family has. I mean, he's like tortured everyone or family members, victims' families in this entire South American village and community, like all around. Like, he's notorious. He's like probably killed hundreds of thousands of people. So, you know, it's evocative of Joseph Mengele, an angel of death kind of guy, doctor of death. So these guys all gang up on him when he's in a car, and they rip him apart. You don't see that, surprisingly, but they do so strongly imply it because they've got to keep that sleaze vibe going, and they did it pretty well. So this was a very entertaining movie, An Evil That Meant To. I liked it. I thought it was maybe unintentionally funny, or maybe I just take joy from stuff that's this weird and paradoxical and incongruous. Having the aging Bronson come up again, totally always a class act, even when he's being a dick, up against this pompous cat who you wouldn't really believe would be this kind of Mingala-like guy, but the incongruity of the whole story, it was cool and it was topical for the 80s because all this crazy shit was going down with the United States toppling these empires in South America, and they probably did employ people like this, and the dictators who were killing their own people, that they were the ones installed by the CIA. They weren't the ones that the democratically elected ones are always the ones the CIA topple, and they put in place the dictators who murder people, and then they pretend like they're the saviors. That's the way it's been for decades. And now the FBI is kind of trying to do it domestically. Kind of they're in competition to see how many horrible things they can do, and then blame it on something else and say they did it for democracy and freedom. So those are my thoughts on a few movies. Welcome to Hell, Midnight, She Beast, and The Evil That Men Do. None of them are classics. All of them are horror or thriller related. So I found all of them Halloween appropriate. So those were my thoughts. This maybe this episode is devoted to mediocrity. The mediocre part of my streaming journey, my adventures in streaming on Tubi. So, but I've also been doing adventures on Shudder and some on other channels. I've chronicled some of those in the previous Halloween streams videos. So I'm pretty sure my next video, my next Blu review that's Halloween related will not be a Halloween streaming one, but a Blu-ray review that I've never done before. Well, I don't know if I've done it before or not. But regardless, it's something I really want to feature before Halloween. It's over a true horror film in every sense of the word, like the ultimate horror film. I'll leave you guessing what it is. So until then, take it easy. Thanks a lot. Please like and subscribe. Rock on.